Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So for those of you who saw part 1, you'll know that I'd made it to McKillops Bridge, and the next stage of the journey was to get over to the township of Dargo. According to my original plans, the journey from this point onwards was just on normal roads, and I'd mapped it out to go down via Bairnsdale and not do too much more off-roading for the day. This would be a pretty easy run and would take about 3 hours at normal highway speeds, and was the route that I'd originally planned in Gaia GPS. I made a bit of a mistake though. After leaving McKillops Bridge, when I first got phone signal, I just switched it over to Google Maps and navigated to Dargo, assuming that Google would take me via normal roads. This is where I made my big mistake of the day, because I didn't realise that there is actually not only the town of Dargo, but also the region of Dargo, and Google was navigating me to the region of Dargo. This meant that I would end up coming across these mountains, and you can see from the tracking points of the Garmin InReach Mini that that's exactly what I ended up doing. And due to the extra distance and the slower pace involved, I was going to end up doing most of this journey in the dark. But I didn't know any of this now and was just setting off from McKillops Bridge in good spirits. Earlier on the way down, I hadn't passed a single vehicle, but heading back up the hill, I found myself passing maybe 7 or 8 different vehicles. This was a convoy of vehicles, and the lead vehicle very helpfully told me how many were behind him.
Okay. Thanks mate. Any more? Alright. Yeah. Alright. Thank you. See ya.
You'll notice that the bike has some issues with traction coming up and gives a funny sort of shudder and loss of power. In my last video, I went into some detail about the difference between off-road mode and off-road pro mode on the Tiger 900. So in the riding mode of off-road pro, the traction control is set to off by default, and in the riding mode of off-road, the traction control is set to off-road by default. The off-road traction control setting does actually a pretty good job of maintaining traction on this sort of terrain, so it's definitely not necessary to get the Rally Pro version of the bike if you're riding on this sort of terrain. And the difference between the normal road traction control mode and the off-road mode is night and day. So until now I'd been very happy just using the off-road mode. However, I did notice that for certain types of terrain, it was giving me this strange juddering feeling, and I was losing some forward push, and I found myself starting to prefer off-road pro mode and didn't have too much trouble modulating the throttle to limit the amount of rear wheel spin I was getting. After a great run up the dirt track, I finally got to the top of the mountains and the valley opened up to farmland. And I knew I had to turn left up the top to head further south down towards Bairnsdale on my journey to Dargo. Ironically, you can see that I'm actually using Gaia GPS here and have the right navigation path set, but I get tempted to just use Google Maps, and this is where the trouble starts. I meant to mention it in the last video, but the tyres I ended up choosing were the Continental TKC80s. It's really hard choosing tyres for adventure bikes because no matter what you do, it's some sort of compromise, but the TKC80s I'd heard were very good on-road even though they had a fairly aggressive pattern, mainly due to the softness of the compound. And of course that means the compromise is that they wear out quickly. But until they do, you've got a very good all-round tyre. I pulled into the very picturesque small town of Bungan to get some fuel for the bike and had some great food at the cafe attached. Coming into the town of Bungan, I hope I'm saying that right, was where I should have really gone straight ahead according to my original plan, but ended up turning right onto the Great Alpine Road, which would have been a fantastic run if I was heading up to Omeo and onto Wangaratta, but definitely wasn't the best way if I was going to the township of Dargo. Here's where I turn off the Great Alpine Road. Instead of heading on towards Omeo and Wangaratta, I go up here thinking it is going to be a fairly normal dirt road. At this stage, Google is telling me that there's only 40 kilometers to go, and the road condition was still really good. So I was pretty much just enjoying the ride and admiring the Victorian countryside. The road conditions started to get worse and worse, and I started to get that feeling you get when you realise that you're on a track that's not really going anywhere and doesn't get much traffic. And with the sun going down and the temperature dropping below 10 degrees and the track getting worse and worse, I was starting to get a bit apprehensive. So I got a bit cheered up when I saw some fellow people out on the road, and I'm glad I stopped to talk because the local knowledge was invaluable.
Get through to Dargo this way?
Yeah, it's a fair trip.
Is it?
It's 60 k's and then probably another 30.
To Dargo?
Yeah, 40, yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, Google's telling me 31 k's.
Oh, no. Into the actual town.
Yeah.
It'd be heaps longer than that.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
We got a grade just under 50 k's of this road. It's Birrigan's Road.
Yeah.
And then it turns into Jones's Road. And that's a fair way. And then it turns into Upper Dargo Road, and then you got to get into Dargo, so yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's a little slow, it's pretty slow going too. Probably not when you get to the top, it's all along the ridge. Most of it, but yeah, it'd be a late one.
Is that right?
Yeah, I reckon so, yeah.
Well, a couple more hours, you reckon, or?
At least 2.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So where's Google got me going to? It's got me going to... it's got me going to Dargo, but that's just like the middle of like the actual... That's not the town of Dargo, is it? Oh, geez,
if I was you, I'd probably wait till tomorrow, personally.
Yeah.
And you want to go to Birrigan Road, then you want to go right at Jones's Road.
Yeah, it's one of those decision points, isn't it?
Mm.
Well, How much fuel have I got?
That's the next thing.
Yeah, I think I got about 3/4.
Oh, that'll be good.
I didn't want to do this. Alright, I better head off then while there's a bit of light left.
Right. Yeah.
Alright, thanks guys.
You'll get reception up there too. So.
Okay, cool.
Good luck.
Thanks.
I guess the easiest way to describe the mistake I'd made is that the original way I would have gone via Pretty Boy Hill Picnic Ground, and this way I was going via Dog's Grave Reserve. The freshly graded track was incredibly greasy, and I can hardly imagine what it would have been like on the 80/20 tyres that the bike came with. It was a real relief to get off the graded section and onto the ungraded section, which was a lot harder and grippier, even though it had plenty of potholes and ruts to contend with. Every time I saw a signpost, I'd stop and check the map, and luckily I was actually getting some phone signal up here. The headlights on the Triumph Tiger 900 are actually incredible, and the GoPro footage doesn't really do it justice. So I've played around with the exposure settings of the video to give you a better idea of what it was actually like at the time. This will reduce the quality of the footage a bit, but it will give you a bit more of an idea of what it was really like at the time. So I'm making the changes to the video now. Apologies if the quality gets worse. At this stage I'd been riding about 11 hours of pretty hard riding and was completely out of energy. I found myself just coming to a stop and turning the engine off so that I could stand there and get my wits about me. Now that I was getting phone signal again, Google Maps was able to pick up the fire trails that I was on, and I was using it again to give myself some rough guidance as to how long I had left to ride. There was a turn coming up onto Stock Route Spur track, and I remember when I was talking to the local bloke that he didn't mention this track, but instead told me that I had to turn right onto Jones Road, off Bungan Road. So I thought that when I got to the turn, I'd just have a look at it and see if there were any signposts. Well, when I got there, it looked like the main road continued on as Bungan Road, and this Stock Route Spur track dropped off so steeply that I couldn't actually see it with the headlights of the bike. I don't show it in the video, but I got off and used the torch to look down there, and it was a very steep, rutted descent. So steep that I wasn't sure I'd be able to get back up if it turned out to be a dead end. So I decided that the most important thing was to get there safely, and it didn't really matter how long it took, so I carried on Bungan's Road. After another hour's riding, the road conditions started to improve, but there was still plenty of local wildlife around to make things interesting. It's hard to describe the relief at getting back to civilization, and the lights of the Dargo pub were very welcome to see. These were the first locals I'd seen, and they were both very friendly. In fact, the dog on the right was standing patiently staring at the door so that he could be let in when I opened it. Well, that's the end of part 2 of the video, and part 3 should be coming out in about a week. I look forward to sharing the rest of the journey. Ride safe, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.